All right, guys, we're back on the Next Level Agents podcast. And today I am joined by my friend Brindley Tucker. Brindley, how are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm great. Even better now.
All right. How's it going? Everything good in your world?
I am learning. Our dear friend Carissa Acker
Oh boy.
is I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
It's gonna
And
be, yeah, I'm fine.
right, I'm fine. And I used to be I'm fine girl. And I'm learning that it's okay to say, like, I'm still fine, but it's been quite a journey. And we're coming to the other side of it. Because I do think that sometimes we just will, I'm good, everything's great.
It's funny you say that. So I've got a good buddy, Michael Burnoff, who is a psychologist, NLP master. Um, and he's like, you talk to any entrepreneur, and if they say they're doing good, that's bullshit. It's like that. He's like that they are absolutely doing terrible, or they're crushing. Because like because if it was they were really doing good, they would tell you about it because that's what entrepreneurs do.
Yep.
But so when they say I'm good, he's like, there's no way like that's true. Like that's what we're used to saying. That's like the normal, it's like the social norm. And we just
Yep.
say it. So if we're good, we're usually not good. So I don't know why you just reminded me of that thought. So Brinley, let's start here.
All
For
right.
the listener that doesn't know you, I mean, gosh, you and I met, it's got to be almost a decade ago now. And you have always, since I've known you, sort of been on I'm going to call it the support and administrative side of the business in different capacities and coaching and things like that. Why don't we tell people first who you are, kind of what you do, and then we'll kind of get into the how backstory of like how you got into that and what that looks like.
Yeah. So I always tell folks I've closed close over 5,000 real estate transactions, but I've never sold a house. I am not the person that's going to teach you how to go on a listing appointment. I've never been on one. I'm not the one that's going to teach you how to do a buyer consult. I've never been on one. I will give you the systems of success that will help you convert the appointment. I will help you set up the systems that will get you on more appointments at a high level by doing more with less. I've always been on the operation scaling side of the business. So team building, leadership, automation, systems, scalability, and my whole life has been on the leverage side. So I've coached most of the top teams in the country at some point in my career on scalability, whether it's expansion or just really heavy, strong teams in the industry. And then I also had a vision very early on that I wanted to provide leverage for agents. And then in 2019, our industry was shifting. COVID had happened. There were new platforms. A lot of agents were going into agent attraction and going to other brokerages to focus on agent attraction and coming out of the production teams. And I saw a need for a space where agents could get leverage and there be another option, right? So we've got amazing, Kevin, you're part of Place. Ben and Chris are dear friends of mine. I'm in Chris's mastermind. We've got huge expansion teams, Adam Hergenrother, Sarah Reynolds, like we've got Veronica Figueroa. We've got a ton of massive teams. Yet there wasn't a place where agents, or space, I should say now, that agents could come at any level in their business and just get the leverage they need and walk away.
So
And so we built it.
so when you say that, like, what do you mean? Leverage is such an all-encompassing word. Like it means so many things,
Yeah.
in different scenarios. So tell me like a little deeper what you mean by that.
Yeah, so we want to follow the lifetime of the agent. So we start with our fractional services, which is leverage that is fractional. So transaction management, listing management, marketing support, social media management, database management. We also have fractional executive assistants and director of operations that if you can't afford that $80,000, $90,000 salary, but you want someone to just come in and do the work, you can buy hours, right? We fractional the operator out. And then we monitor your spend. And when you get to about, the 30, 35,000 annually in fractional spend, then we say, okay, it's probably time for you to bring leverage on. And we get them over to our hiring department and we start looking for that permanent leverage. So we hire that first assistant, or we hire that second assistant, or we help you find your controller, or if you own a brokerage, your accountant or your team leader, or whatever, that any position inside a brokerage or a team.
So when I
And
hear
then
that, when I
and then
hear
we train
that,
them.
I hear like you're helping people, and totally correct me if I'm wrong, because like this is my interpretation. You're sort of helping people sort of baby step into leverage because,
That's exactly right.
and I'm going to just put my own, spin on it. And it's because it's hard to do. I'm going to just say it this way too. Most of us screw it up. And the reason, there's multiple reasons why, which we could talk about. But I don't think we have that kind of time today to talk about all the reasons and ways that we screw it up. However, I think the biggest one is because we just never put in the time to, if we put in the time to be great at sales, so that way we need leverage, we don't then go put in the time that we need to get great at leverage. And so it's really hard. And so people tend to hire and then it falls apart. They might hire one or two, falls apart again, stuff like that. So like to take a step, 2 steps forward, like 4 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, that type of deal. And it sounds to me like you're sort of offering a way to help people sort of baby step into that. Is that an accurate like interpretation?
It is. We don't want them to take their foot off the gas, because so much of the agent's time can be pulled away from sales by going into all the non-income producing activities. So we immediately want to be able to eliminate that straight out of the gate at an affordable price that can work with anyone's budget and P&L. What I do find though is, you mentioned NLP, Kevin. I'm a master practitioner in NLP. And a lot of times the reason we're not getting leverage isn't at the conscious level. It's at the unconscious level.
Yeah.
There's some type of fear that we're going to lose the business if we don't do it, or we're not going to get the business if it's not done right, or if we hand it over, right? Because it's just our industry is different. Entrepreneurship is different, right? There's not stability, there's not security, there's not a whole lot of control. And so we'll overexert control to make up for the lack of it. And so what we want to do is help coach agents through that process to help them get to the point where they can now have their own leverage in-house, or they are big enough to plug into a platform like Place Now, and let them know that from day one, you can have leverage and it doesn't have to be you.
That's awesome.
You're not the who.
So how did you, I think we could talk about this for a while, but let's go backwards in time a minute, sort of prior to this. Like, how did this become your thing? Like, what was it? Was there an interaction with a business owner, or like with a real estate agent, or what was the thing that like, sort of like, what was the Big Bang Theory for this for you?
I've royally screwed up my life.
How does that relate to leverage?
Yeah. So in 2012, I was probably in one of the darkest times of my life. I had hit a true rock bottom. I had gotten to a point where I was drinking in the mornings just to not have to deal with the hangovers from the night before. And I was self-medicating the night before to just get the voices in my head to stop. I hated myself. I hated the life that I had built around myself. And I knew I didn't want to die, but I knew I didn't want to live. And I didn't know how to get out of where I was. And I decided that I want to go into real estate because I want to make a lot of money and not have to have anybody tell me what to do.
Oh my God, you're like every other realtor I've ever met. I want to have flexible hours and make 6 figures.
That's right.
So good to hear that. It's original.
And I went to this really big real estate conference in February of 2012. And all I heard at the time was God, family, business. And everybody was so happy. And I was like, I don't even know how you can be that happy. Like, I don't even get it. Like that level of like, I wasn't even near.
That's gross. You guys stop it.
It was disgusting. And I came home from that conference and I literally cried out to God. And I said, I don't want to live, but I don't want to die. And I don't know how to get out of here. And I believe he whispers, he speaks, he yells, he roars. And Memorial Day weekend of 2012, I was coming home from an agent's house that was working in our office because I had taken an admin position in a brokerage.
So at this point, you were actually licensed?
I wasn't licensed yet. So my mother started as a secretary for Raymond James in 1985. And when I graduated from college, she was the only female senior vice president of institutional sales for the state of New York.
Wow.
So I was raised by a very independent masculine woman that I saw her trajectory go from admin to VP. And so that's all I ever knew was like, if you want to grow and learn something, become an admin. So I became an admin in real estate. So I was working in a brokerage as an office manager. And one of the agents in the office had a party, and I went over, and they had no idea how much I had had to drink. And on the way home, I made a U-turn in front of a motorcycle in the middle of a blackout. And I woke up the next morning in the bottom of a jail cell and had no idea how I got there. And when I got out, I called the police station to find out where my car was. And they told me it was being held in investigation of a vehicular homicide.
Wow.
And I remember looking at my mom sitting like 5 feet on the couch from me. And I'm like, what am I going to do if I killed someone? And my entire life changed that day, Kevin. Like, I believe by the grace of God, that man didn't die because God knew I'd be more useful out here than I would be in prison for the rest of my life. And everything changed that day, including my job, right? I was in a brokerage. They had to fire me because I was facing a lot of felonies. Even though although I didn't take his life, I had caused quite a bit of damage that I had to repair. And a few of the agents in the office knew that I wanted to make some changes in my life. And they said, why don't you come help us? We need, admin tasks done. At the time, there was a tech platform in our old company, our company called eEdge, and I would build websites. And then Fred Collis called me one day, and he was like, hey, you're really smart, and I don't like my TC. Do you want to do transaction work? And I couldn't drive at this point. Like, I always say I had the best ass in Tampa Bay because I was literally biking. I would strap a laptop to the back of a beach cruiser, and I would bike from agent to agent doing work for them, like 60 miles a day in the dead of summer in Florida. And I called Maureen Casco, and I was like, oh my gosh, Fred Collis wants me to do his transactions. He's going to pay me a lot of money to do it. It was like $350 a file. And she recorded, because we didn't use video back then, she recorded audio on how to process a Florida state real estate transaction. And that's how I did my first transaction. And in 3 years, I built my first independent TC company to doing about 2,000 transactions a year. And then MAPS Coaching came and knocked on my door and said, hey, why don't you come build operations coaching for us? Because I had a passion for, I even remember back then, I think this is how we started meeting, was I met through your DOO. And I wanted to bring operations to agents because that's where they were struggling. They all knew how to sell houses in their sleep. They didn't know how to scale the organization and build it. So I sold that company to my employees and went to work for MAPS.
So I want to go back a second. It's 2,000 transactions. So, I mean, it started with this one guy. I think you said his name was Fred.
Yep.
And then did it just grow like, hey, you did a great job here. So then this other, this agent down the hall needed help. And then this other agent needed help. And then they had heard about you. And so was that kind of like how it built?
Yeah. And that's why I sold it in 2 years, Kevin, because I'm a salesperson, not a TC. Right. I'm a DC. So I'm a disc, if you know the disc,
Yep.
I'm a DC. And so I could sell it all day long, but I couldn't sit in the transactions all day long. So by like the second year, I was like, get me out of this.
You're like, I gotta go.
I gotta go. I want something new. And in our new business, the second time I did it, I haven't touched a file since the minute I came into the business, because I'm much better in, again, the scaling, the structuring, the team building, the leadership, and being the face.
So then you sold the business and you dove into MAPS Coaching, which for the listener who doesn't know what that is, it's a coaching company that Keller Williams Realty owns. So you went to MAPS Coaching and started designing their operation. I'll call it operations coaching. Is that what the deal was?
Yeah, because this was the time when, as you know, expansion was coming in to the marketplace, and we had EA training, right? The executive assistant, that first hire that starts with the rainmaker or the agent as their first hire, their right hand. And now we were starting to get into large teams, expansion models, which were requiring us to have massive operations that would support cross-border, would support, other cities, and being able to scale and automate that at a high level. And that's what I started building out for MAPS, was their operations coaching.
And how long did you do that for?
I did that for about almost 3 years, right?
So,
Right till about COVID time.
so you, I mean, so you must have done, I mean, built a lot. I'm assuming you probably met with and or coached directly or consulted with tons of agents through that period. Is that as you sort of, so yeah, I think you said right up until about COVID is when you moved on from there. And during the time, like in those couple years, like what did you learn, or kind of what were the holes that you were seeing besides the obvious ones? Like we already talked about the fact that the leverage in general is a giant hole in our industry. It's a giant need for people to learn. But were there any things that like stuck out to you or maybe even surprised you while you were in that role with Maps, as you were talking to and consulting and coaching so many different businesses around the country?
Well, the reason you and I are friends, Kevin, is because our mouths get us in trouble. And so this is probably what's going
I
to
don't know
happen
what
right
you're talking about.
now. Is I would, I was honestly surprised about how many of them were broke.
Yeah. Uh,
Right.
it's
That was
a,
probably, honestly, that was probably the biggest surprise. They were projecting these big volume numbers. Like, I don't even talk about volume. That's an ego goal. You only say that because that's the biggest one, right? We talk, I want to know your net and I want to know your transaction count, because your transaction count is going to tell me what we need to do to scale and hire.
yes. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank
And
you.
your net
Please
is going
for
to tell me how you feed your family,
thank
right?
you. Thank
And
you. The only two numbers that matter.
they're the
If I hear
only,
someone else talk about volume and GCI again, I'm gonna puke. I get it. There's a time and place for it, but like from stage is not it.
no,
I've always said the same thing. Like if I'm talking to an agent, regardless if I'm talking on the sales side or admin side or whatever, like I want to know the number of transactions that got pushed through your system
that's right.
because that tells me so much more than what your volume was. It tells
That's
me
right.
so much more. And then obviously net is because at the end of the day, like we should be doing it. Not all of us are. We should be
That's right.
doing this to make money. You know, profit is absolutely always a priority if you're a great leader. So, um,
100%.
I appreciate you saying that.
Now, I will say to those of you that are out there listening that are in this boat and you're hearing us say this and you're going a little internal, right? And you're starting to beat yourself up a little bit. There's not a single business owner in America, or a good one, that has stayed in business for a long, more than 3 to 5 years, that has not gone through this and learned it the hard way.
Yep.
Every single one of us has. And I was in platinum partnership with Tony Robbins last year, where I got to meet a lot of business owners outside of our industry. And they all also struggle with it, because in the beginning, you're just doing whatever you need to do to generate and make it rain to pay your bills. And then you start getting money and you get really excited, and then your wealth files take over. So however your psychology of money, whatever your psychology is around money, is now that's where your behavior starts going. You either start spending it or hoarding it, which neither one is healthy, right? And then one day you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, I'm working my rear end off. There's money coming in, there's all this cash coming in, but there's nothing left over. And then that's when you finally decide, do I quit, or do I power through it and go through learning about my numbers, learning about my financials, looking at every penny? And that's not fun for a lot of us.
And you know what I find interesting in that too, Brindley, is that people get to that decision, like, should I quit? Should I power through it? And oftentimes I'll see people make the wrong choice because there's not like a one size fits all answer there, right? Because they don't have the right feedback or coaching or mentorship around them, or they're not in touch with reality, right? And so they'll power through and because they think they're being quote gritty because they were told to read the book Grit. And so they think that's the thing. And they really should be doing something completely different. Like there's no self-awareness
That's right.
or the other way around, they're like, oh, this sucks. And they're like fucking 3 feet from gold, you know, figuratively. And it's tough to figure out which one, if you, number one, you're not grounded in reality. And number two, you don't have people around you who's also grounded in reality and willing to be honest with you and actually has the business acumen to give you that feedback. And I think that's I could go on and on about that because it is so nuanced. Like for some people, the answer really is okay. So the guest on our podcast last week, very dear friend of mine, Dave Z, he has
Mm.
really figured out who he is as a business person and as a business owner. He makes a ton of money he is super leveraged and he does not have a lot of people in his organization. And it's perfect for him. It's the exact opposite of me. Like I made a decision a long time ago. I need to be as many steps away from what I would call the living room as possible in order for my business. Right. And, and not having the self-awareness to figure out, number one, where you're at. And then number two, like who you really are as a person and what kind of business you really want. And again, it's because you and I were talking off screen about like the stage talk too and stuff. It's like you hear someone say something from stage. And it's like, 5% of the story. So you start going down that trail and you have no business going down that trail because you don't even understand what that trail is.
That's right. That's right. I've had the hardest 6 months that I've ever had in business. And I don't know if you've read the book, The Road Less Stupid, Kevin, by Keith Cunningham.
Literally my favorite business book I have to tell you
It is
this.
the best. It is the best. Like
Keith
15
is the
times.
best.
Yeah.
Keith Cunningham, the author. And listeners, if you haven't read it, for the love of God, please buy this book and read it, and then read it once. I was tweeting yesterday with a guy named Shane Parrish, who has a great podcast and in the tech world and stuff. And he's like, tell me a book or article that you read yearly for at least 3 years. I was like, Road Less Stupid, like starts and ends with that yes, that is the best book. I love that
It's
guy.
operations manual. It is the business owner's operations manual.
Oh yeah.
So in the book, he talks about the apology letter.
Yeah.
And I wrote my version of the apology letter on September 13th. It's my entire organization. At the time I think we were at 28 team members, 19 stateside and 9 overseas. And I basically said, like, I've been more of your friend than your leader. I've cared more about, because of my story and becoming a totally different human in the last 10 years and this kind of journey back to who I was meant to be before my addiction and my triggers and my emotional trauma and all of that. Like, I want to be able to help others do the same. And so I made the personal development of the individual more important than the overall financial health of the business. And I wasn't holding people accountable. I was in business with friends. And I basically had to say, like, I'm the one flipping the script. And I get it. Like, this isn't going to be easy for a lot of people. And not all of us may make it to the other side together. Yet we are going to become an accountable organization that is measured on performance and success so that we're profitable, so that we can change the trajectory of your lives and your family's lives. And I have 2 people that are still with me 6 months later. And we're a team of 17. And what it's allowed me to do is, like, we just onboarded yesterday our final hire that's part of our like 12 to 18 month plan. And he worked for BlackRock and he's our new COO. And I never, if you would have told me in September that I would have been able to afford an executive that used to work for one of the biggest private equity companies in the country, I would have told you were insane. And by getting real and getting on it now, I'm a monster. I'm an awful leader. I've been called every name in the book in the last 6 months. And there's moments I'm proud of, and there's moments that I'm not proud of, that I failed forward as a leader and didn't handle it. I'm the one that it's all on me.
Are you saying you're human? You're a human being?
Human. That's right. And yet I cried yesterday, the first tears of relief, and seeing the vision all come to life because of the impact that we want to make in agents' businesses. And it's not easy. It's simple and it's not easy. And yet, if I had followed the advice of my mentors like you and Ben and Chris and all these others for so many years, I wouldn't have gone through the pain. But the reality is we're all human. And most of the time we have to figure it out on our own timeline.
So you just said 2 things that really stuck out to me that are fresh. So I was on a Zoom on Monday so you and I are recording this is today a Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
So 2 days ago I was on a Zoom and Brian Gubernick was presenting. Ben Kinney was on it. Chris Suarez was on it as well. And he was presenting attributes of a great business leader. A little like a slide deck that he put together and kind of presentation. And 2 of them that stuck out to me that you literally just said. One of his was act as a boss and not a buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one that he said is always remember the importance of profit. So I won't go into all the others that he talked about, but that is so true. It's so, I think, so this was, I'm going to throw this at you. You and I probably had this conversation years ago, but one of the things that used to really piss me off or really annoy me about being in like in that top 100 room is I would hear everyone wanted to talk about leadership and culture as it like we were this. And don't get me wrong, I love some of the people I work with in my business, like literally love and would stop a bullet for. And we had to get there. And so many times I feel like we talk about these words like leadership and culture instead of like being really great business people, that then having a great business creates a culture in and of itself. Right. And by having the right people, you create a culture in and of itself by doing that, instead of like, oh, because we want to have all these benefits and these perks. And so then we tend to be friends instead of like employee employer. And it's just, in fact, I know you know this, it's so popular in our industry to not even use the word employee. Like we like to say partner because it makes us feel better, as if we're it's kind of like the business.
That's a whole nother podcast episode.
It's like the wokeness of business, right? Like I can't say that they're an employee. I have to say that they're my partner, my partner. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to puke. Anyways, I digress.
It's, and what's interesting. So during this whole time, I'm reading this letter and I'm reading Keith's book, and he talks about culture in the book. And
he changed ours, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, he totally changed ours. And I also somebody recommended at the time when I was redefining culture to read Trey Taylor's book, A CEO Only Does Three Things. And one of those things is people, it's culture. And I always was raised, similar to you, Kevin, that the people set the culture. The people in the organization set the culture. No, they don't. You as the leader set the culture. You get to decide what you want your culture to look like and then hire to it, coach up to it. Because the reality is, and people say it all the time, people over profit. If you don't have profit, you won't have people.
People over profit is the dumbest fucking saying ever. I get the heart of it. I do. But if that's not true, nobody who says that means it. Because if they did, they would be millionaires and billionaires and they're just giving away their money. And that's not actually what's happening.
And I was one of those people. I was the Brene Brown follower, people over, profit, and it put us in debt. And I was like, this isn't helping anyone. This isn't helping me. It's not helping you. And so I redefined the culture. And Trey and Keith both have beautiful exercises on how to redefine your values. And what's really powerful is we didn't just do like fun, passion, God, fun. Like we really sat down and like we asked every single person in the organization, what do we do really well? And then I took all of that information and I pulled out the key words that stood out to me. And then truly, like you said, your previous guest got real clear on who he was as a business owner. I got really congruent on what I wanted us to stand for, not just to ourselves, but to each other, to our clients. And those were going to become the barometer for everything in our business. All of our corrective conversations are now centered around those values. All of our performance reviews are centered around those values, right? And it is, are you loyal? Are you striving for excellence? Are you accountable? Are you dependable? Are you bringing equality? Are you resourceful? And are you being of service? That means you're a leader. And it was really cool. The first corrective conversation that we had to have with a new team member, and we pulled that out. I mean, I could cry, Kevin, just thinking about how I felt as a leader after that conversation, because it wasn't emotional anymore. It wasn't, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why aren't you hitting your goals? It was, hey, we're out of alignment with our values. How do we get back into alignment? And we're out of alignment with dependability. So how can we get back in alignment with dependability so we can get back on track?
So I got to highlight something you just said, and then I'm going to add something else to it. So you just said, hey, we're out of alignment. How? You use the word how, not why. And a good friend and mentor and someone who's coached me in the past one of the very first things he taught me was like, remove the word why from your vocabulary. I'm talking about John Cheplack. He's
Yep.
like, why is a word of judgment. Remove that word from your vocabulary when you, especially when you're talking to your people, because it's such a word of judgment as opposed to a place of observation, right? And so I love that you're saying like, hey, we're out of alignment. How do we fix this? How do we get back into an alignment with what we said or what we all agreed to is the process or kind of the way that we're trying to be heading. That to me, that is so valuable. Like, and so I wanted to highlight that. I didn't want that to be left like unnoticed, because that to me, saying how instead of why is one of the biggest and best changes we can make when it comes to the conversations we're having with people in our world.
100%. Why automatically puts people on defense.
Yep. Yeah. It's a judgment. And it's just a word of judgment. That's all it is. And in changing it is so powerful. Back to Keith Cunningham. One of the things I realized was after reading The Road Less Stupid the first time, and actually too, I had the pleasure of actually listening to him speak live for a
Mm-hmm.
couple of days before I even read the book. Was if I remember, Fred and I had a talk right after, and we realized like where we really focused on our culture was with our administrative staff. That was because listen, I'm a salesperson too. I'm guilty. I'm a card carrying member. But if we try to be like the way you end up with like foosball tables and snacks and shit like that is by trying to create culture for salespeople.
That's right.
The way a business really has a culture is like when you're administrative, like when the rock and the backbone of everything that happens inside your system has a culture and a way of doing things, and their needs are met. Culture is the easiest thing to handle. Like it becomes so simple. And that was one of the very first things I picked up from Keith, that I just wanted to share on that. And
Well, and can I share something on that I think will help audiences that we're going through is my team is 100% remote. So I have people in 4 countries and then all over the United States. And we've had to sustain culture and create strong culture in the midst of being a remote company without a lot of physical time together. And that can be done. And it's exactly what Kevin said. I set what I want the culture to be, but I don't create it every day. And so we created a culture committee whose whole job is to maintain team cohesiveness and culture remotely. So they've come up with things like we do virtual lunch together every other week where we all get on Zoom and eat lunch together. We have, we use our Slack, or we use Click, but we use Slack that has like a food channel and a furries like animal channel, and they share their dogs and all the stuff that you would normally do if you were
thank you
sitting in a
for thank you for
together.
clarifying that it's like their animals and not like when you said furry, my head went somewhere else. So
Mine did too.
I'd
That's
like to
why
thank you for clarifying that for the listener.
I don't need an HR nightmare on my hands.
Right.
So that's been really cool, where they have to do stand-ups every morning. They all get on at 9:30 together, and I'm not on that, and they lead it. A different team member leads it every week, and they bring content and they share with one another. So if you're out there and you're going, I already have a million things to do, like how am I supposed to plan all this? You don't have to. You just have to decide what you want your culture to be. And then, like Kevin said, go to your support staff and they'll do it. They
Yeah.
love doing this stuff. They'll plan it, they'll run it. And they send me reminders now because they know, like, I'm not going to remember it's Employee Appreciation Day. But
Yep.
they won't set me up for failure. They go, hey, we know this is important to you. So just letting you know, take 5 minutes, go create something and send it out to the team.
Yeah.
They don't get their panties in a wad because I didn't remember, right?
It's true. I mean, it's true that I'm a firm believer, and that's where if you're going to like your sort of mountain to fight or whatever, when it comes to culture is there. It's there. It's on the administrative side. And then that will absolutely take care of everything else.
And you know what'll build culture with your salespeople? Competition. It blows my mind that we are the largest sales industry in the country, in the nation, in the world. And yet we do not run contests and quotas. But every other sales organization out there has quotas and has contests. And when I can get teams starting to run contests, good ones, on a regular basis, the production, the culture is the production. And when the production is happening, everyone feels like they're winning, and your culture is phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, show me a room or a team or a company full of salespeople hitting their goals, and I'll show you a good culture. Like
That's right.
it's there natural. Like there's nothing artificial about it. It's there naturally because the people have focused on the things that matter. And at the end of the day, like you've got to drive the business. When you drive the business and you're hitting those goals, that's when all of that other stuff, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid a good culture if you have great results. Like they go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So okay, so as we start to wrap up here, I want to make sure, I want to kind of go back to your company a little bit. So you mentioned the last 6 months being really hard. You've obviously sort of rebuilt your team with a strong foundation. Obviously, we talked a little bit about kind of how you help your client, right, or your customer. What Tell me, what are like what are the things that you're either most excited about in the industry and for your company and your clients as we're going forward in 2023, or what are some of the things that maybe even have you like concerned, as we look towards the like immediate future?
Well, the first thing I'm super excited about is that, and I think all of us learn this in business, is that you hire generalists to build, and you have to hire specialists to scale. And this whole 6 month kind of rebirth that we've been through in the last 6 months has been taking us from generalists to specialists. And that's why it's increasing our profitability at such a high level, is because we don't have anyone inside of our company that has less than 5 years experience. So we now have a company with proven talent, which can do the job of 2 to 3 generalists. So I think that's a really pivotal, exciting time, because now I was describing it as like the bulldog. You know how a bulldog feels like really firm to the ground and like really strong. So that's what I'm most excited about, because my biggest fear is for agents going into this next market. And I'm not I mean, Kevin, you and I both know some of them are our dearest friends. Like some people take a very wartime approach, and I don't. Like I'm a mindset girl. I'm an NLP. I've almost died. I've almost killed someone. Like when you almost lose your life, like not a lot scares you. And I'm also a realist. Like I don't have my head so far at my, that nothing's coming. And I think number one, and I'm going to say this out loud because I met with several rainmakers at a conference here recently who are not doing well, and they're having to lay people off. The profitability is not there. And probably half a dozen of them, I said, there's one thing such by doing that will solve all of your problems. And it was what? And I said, get back into production. And every single one of them said, I'd rather it burn to the ground than to have to go sell another house.
I could
So
relate to
that's what
that though.
scares me.
And
That's
that,
what scares me. That's what scares me, is that we've gotten so comfortable and so conditioned and so taught that success in this industry is not being in production, that at the time when you need to be in production the most, it's going to work against you. And so we're hiring the people they're laying off, and we're going to help the agents that still want to work but don't want to carry the big salaries. So I just know that our impact is just starting, because we have a space where they can come, get leverage, and leave, right? They don't have to sell their business. They don't have to sell their database. And it's temporary, right? It's
yeah,
cyclical.
it's
We're going to come out of this.
it's like
We're
I
going to,
described it in my head as I think of it as like baby steps, and if it's a baby step, that means there's not like you can basically kind of put your toe in the water, get what you
yeah,
need, and go, and then maybe you need more, but maybe you don't.
that's right.
And that's kind of cool. And that offers like great flexibility when you do things that way. So I love that.
And you can do it under one umbrella. You don't have to go to this person for your transactions, this person for your
Yeah,
marketing, this person we're monitoring your whole business, even when you're not with us. So we know where you are in the life cycle of your business.
that's awesome. That is so cool. It's funny. You mentioned like the not go back into production thing. I laugh because I'm first of all, I'm that guy. I've been that way for a long time. Like I designed my entire business around not having to be in there. However, I designed my business around that. So that way I didn't have to. It's not like I didn't just get to ride the last 3 years into that. I purposely designed my business around that a decade ago. And so that's where we're at. But the reality is you're right. For some people, like that's that. And I always say like the last thing I want to do is go sell a house. And yet if I had to, if it meant like my family eats next month or doesn't, like I'm going on a listing appointment. I just am. Even though it's like the last thing I want to do, I absolutely would go do it. And I would crush it at it, or I would go do it 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, whatever I needed to do. And you're right. There are some people, you see we all know about expense creep. And when times are good, like they have been over the last couple of years, it's so easy to just be spending and let all these really bad habits creep up. And like, we don't notice them because we're still doing really good. And there's a lot of folks, a lot of people getting exposed right now. And it's going to be, it's going to be a rough go. Even if the market quote unquote shifted back or all of a sudden was amazing again, there's still going to be some like residual, sort of like fallout from basically the last year or so where people didn't realize what was going on in their own business.
Yeah. And I'll just say this real quick. I listened to a podcast with Elon Musk, and the interviewer was like, "Hey, Elon, how do you handle those days like when you just want to quit? Like, how do you handle those days when it's too much and you're being sued and all this stuff and you just want to quit?" And Elon was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And the interviewer's like, "Those days that like you want to quit." And Elon's like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "Come on, Elon, like you want to quit." And he's like, "Quitting's not an option. We have a mission, and that's to put humans on Mars. And until that's complete, we don't quit. Quitting isn't an option." And Keith says it. Self-doubt, the number one constant thing, the only constant in business is self-doubt.
Yeah.
That's the only constant in business. It's just you have to tell yourself quitting isn't an option. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through whatever it is. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make up for the mistakes that I made in the past, the expenses I haven't paid yet, the things that I need to do, because quitting isn't an option because we have a mission.
So true. That was really good. I think we should end it there. Like that's it's a great tying off point. Brindley, for anybody, first of all, I don't even think we've said it yet. What's the name of your company?
Your Realty Leverage.
Your Realty Leverage. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, whether to like follow you personally or connect with you personally, or to inquire about Your Realty Leverage, how do they do that?
So you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, Brindley Tucker. If you want NLP, leadership, mindset kind of stuff, you can follow Your Realty Leverage on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. If we do webinars every week, all value around leverage and operations. And then if you'd like to book some time to just talk about your business and what leverage looks like, you can go to ineedleverage.com, and we'll do a 15-minute quick call with you just to start to see what you're looking at.
I Need Leverage. I love that URL. That's a great one.
I have I Need Leverage and Submit a File.
Nice. Oh, really? That's good. Are you using Submit a File right now, or is it just parked?
We're totally using it.
I was gonna say that's amazing. That's so good. Anyways, URLs. That's a whole other conversation.
All day long.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Brindley. Reach out to her if you want to inquire about what they've got going on at Your Realty Leverage, or if you're just interested in learning more, follow her, check her out. She's awesome. And we'll see you guys next week. Brindley, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you, Kevin, so much. This was fun.
All right. Talk to you guys next week.